So to me, there's no shame in devoting your life to the perfection of craft beer.
Welcome to the Lush Life podcast. I'm your drinking companion, Susan Schwartz, and I bring you the how-to guide for living life one cocktail at a time. Thanks to my mother's love of martinis, the first words I spoke were shaken, not stirred, and I've been obsessed by cocktails ever since. Together, we'll learn from bartenders, brand ambassadors, distillers, and others why certain drinks are popular in certain cultures, how to make the perfect old-fashioned, when to shake and when to stir, and so much more. Hear that sound? It's time to cozy up to the bar and let the fun begin. Our guest today made his way from Georgetown, Kentucky to Tahara, Japan, and came back with Ganbaru, the Japanese word for never stopping until a goal is achieved. This became crystal clear when I met Daniel Harrison, co-founder of Country Boy Brewery. DH, as he's known, was always a beer lover, but during his stint teaching English in Japan, it became a passion. Arriving home in Kentucky, he and his partners were inspired not only to make beer, but the very best, and won't stop until this goal is achieved.
So I am born and raised in Scott County, Kentucky. Scott County, Central Kentucky, Georgetown, in Scott County. I went to Scott County High School, graduated in 2000. After high school, I went to Georgetown College, which is in Georgetown, Kentucky. After Georgetown, where I majored in French language and business administration and history at Georgetown. After that, I went to grad school at the University of Kentucky, just up the road in Lexington. Majored in international organizations and agricultural economics. The Patterson School of International Commerce and Diplomacy is the name of the school.
Now, you said you studied French. Did you think you were going to go to France?
Yeah, I've been blessed my entire life to be an adventurer. I had parents that pushed me to do that. So I got to travel to Europe several times in high school. I did 6 summers consecutively in a row doing humanitarian aid in Bosnia, former Yugoslavia after the war, with a missions group to start out with, and then a humanitarian aid group after that. I've been to South America. I've been blessed to travel, and I've always been an adventurous person, an adventurous eater, an adventurous drinker.
So you had this, you went into graduate school and you came out with this degree.
Yeah, and then spun my wheels a little bit, trying to figure out what do I want to do, even though I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But one day an opportunity presented itself through an email from Georgetown College saying, we are accepting applications for teachers, English as a second language teacher, ESL teachers, to go to Tahara Japan, Georgetown, Kentucky's sister city. So you could interview. Georgetown grads are open. You can interview to be considered for the position. So I thought, man, it'd be awesome. I had no connection to Japan. I didn't know how to speak anything in Japanese, say anything in Japanese. Had no Japanese training, culturally or otherwise. Just knew that I'd never been to Japan. Sounds cool. I'll take a chance and go. And so I interviewed, was selected, and then got picked to get on a plane September 11th of 2006 to head to Japan. And so a buddy that I knew from college was also on the plane with me. We both were picked together, got to Japan, and just fell in love with it. Japan can be a hard culture to assimilate into. You know, when I was in Bosnia, I could blend in. When I was in France, I could blend in, as long as I didn't open my mouth and let Kentucky come out. But in Japan, it's a little more difficult because no matter how long I'm there, I can never blend in, 100%. And so when you're there as an expat, normally you have to get into something, whether it's I had friends that got into history or flower arranging or Japanese music. We got into beer. I've always liked beer. Thought Japanese beer was super cool. Thought Japanese microbrewers were super cool. They were still kind of fresh and new. They were just legalized in the mid-'90s over there. And so started going around with a blog and detailing Japanese craft breweries. In English, one of the first.
Now, were you a beer drinker before that?
Yeah, I always was a big beer fan. You know, showing up to the bar, I'd be the one that wasn't drinking the normal stuff. Like, what do you have weird? It's on tap. Like I said, I got that from mom and dad. I want the weird food. I'll give it a try. I'll travel to the weird place. I've always been kind of a wanderer. Uh-huh. And so.
Do you remember the first place you went in Japan? Like the first pub?
Oh, absolutely. There was a bar right next to our apartment, actually, which was the first place we went in to have a drink there, 100%. It's called Kiraku. It's still there today.
And did you just like go through each beer, try?
It's a little bit different
everything?
in Japan. Most of those bars like that just have one type of beer on tap.
Oh.
You have to get to kind of the craft centric bars to try some different stuff because the Japanese are still having their love-hate relationship with what is craft beer, and education is a big part over there as well. But through the blog, we met a bunch of brewers, met a bunch of microbrewery owners and things like that.
What was your blog called?
Good Beer and Country Boys,
Okay.
hence where the name comes from. There weren't many. There's a lot of northeastern folks from the States who go over there and teach, or from California, obviously from proximity. Not a lot of folks from the South, definitely not a lot from Kentucky. And so my friend Nathan and I, who were there, who actually happens to be, spoiler alert, my business partner now, one of my partners, we were known as the Country Boys to both the expats and our Japanese friends because we were from Kentucky. So hence that's where the name comes from. But after meeting Brian Baird, B-A-I-R-D, Baird Beer Company, we were just infected by his passion for craft beer and how he ran his business and his ethos when it came to, the best beers out there, spare nothing, spare no expense. We can make the greatest.
So he was an
world.
American expat
From Oxford, Ohio.
making beer in Japan.
Yeah, started a brewery there in 2000 with his wife Sayuri. He's from, like I say, he's from Ohio, but he's been there since the mid 80s. So, got a great brand, great brewery, fell in love with that. And then just fell in love with his beer and like I said, his whole brand, and kind of transitioned the blog a little bit to more breweries, but finding his beer out there in the wild. Then when we came back from Japan, Nathan and I, we kind of met with him, and he, in a very Asian way, Japanese way especially, charged us with coming back to Kentucky and starting a brewery. Follow your passions. DH, you can go back and learn how to run the business and learn how to manage the brand and be the front of the house. Nate, go back and learn how to brew the beer on a commercial level. We were homebrewers at the time. That's very different than where we are now. And it was a very real thing. And I can remember in 2008 sitting at that bar with him thinking, if we really get down and we bootstrap it, tighten the belt, we can get a brewery open by 2015. And we got it open in 2012.
So 4 years after returning.
We stayed in Japan. I stayed in Japan another 2 years of 2008. Okay. So we got back in 2010, and we opened in Lexington in 2012.
All right. And how did you know what beer to start with?
We had an extensive homebrew catalog of stuff that we'd brewed, and we'd been brewing, we kind of changed from brewing the different beer every week to trying to brew the same beer every week and make it consistent and have friends over and give us opinions on it. And that was kind of different. Everybody that's ever homebrewed, their best friends, this beer's awesome. You should start a brewery. I'm like, cool. Well, did they drink your beer for free? I'm like, yeah. Well, cool. Ask him, would he give you $5 for it? It ain't that. It ain't $5 worth. So what we started doing is, is this beer good? Cool. It's $5 for the next one. And we weren't really charging for it. We were just saying, is there value associated with it? Is that good? And so we built a catalog from there. And then when we got the brewery open, we just kind of rolled that into where we wanted to go.
And now, how long? So it's been 2010 to
2012. We opened in Lexington, so we'll be 7 when we get to February of 2019. Mm-hmm. We broke ground on this facility in March of 2016.
So where were you before? You were in Lexington?
We were downtown Lexington with our original brewery, and now we sit in the Lanes Run Business Park in Georgetown, Scott County, which is just 20 minutes up the road, but a vastly different culture, a lot more rural here, with space to be able to build this 24,000 square foot facility versus our entire facility there is about 4,000 square feet.
When did you know that it was time to move?
About 2.5 years in, we realized that if we wanted to continue on a trajectory of where it felt like we were going, we needed to have more space. We needed to have more room with the potential to roll. There was a big risk, though. No one has a crystal ball to know how both the beer community is going to accept us, how the beer market's going to go. So at some point in time, we just had to say, okay, we're going to trust ourselves. We think we make the best damn beer in America. Let's give it a go, and sign the note, talk to the banks, get the money in place, talk to the construction company. It was a long process there too, because we don't do anything halfway. We want to make sure, even down to the electricians and the plumbers, they see our vision, so that when you look at this place, every little detail's been thought about when it comes to pouring the freshest beer, minimally processed ingredients, most efficient production processes in the back, things of that nature.
What do you think you took from Japan that that you use in that?
Japanese people, Japanese culture, and the Japanese people have an inherent appreciation and desire for perfection of whatever craft they're in. So the greatest example of that is a movie that was out a couple years ago called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. But you typically out there when you're in a culinary or a craft, the pinnacle of innovation and the perfection of a machine is a Japanese version of it. And I think that just goes back to their culture of whatever we do, we're going to dedicate our life to. When I was there, one of my teachers at one of my schools had a tree in his front yard, and his house was also a shrine, and the tree was over like the cemetery next to it. And he said, his task was he was an arborist, albeit not a trained one. But he said, in my grandchildren's grandchildren, this tree might be perfect then. Right? So we don't really have that in the Western world, more importantly America, because we see everything as on a finite lifespan of our lifespan. But in the Japanese culture, we're perfecting things that we may not be able to attain perfection until 10 generations from now. But it's my job with my time on earth to be able to advance my craft, right? And the fact that, whether you're making pencils or chairs or Japanese knives or textiles or whatever it may be, cars, I can say that, obviously we're in Georgetown, Kentucky, so we have a super affinity for Toyota and its influence and impact on culture and economics here in Central Kentucky. It's the dedication of your life to perfecting your craft. So to me, there's no shame in devoting your life to the perfection of craft beer. And I took that from Brian Baird, which some people, especially with the American mindset, might think that and say, oh, that's silly. It's just beer at the end of the day. And while we don't take ourselves super serious, we take what we do very serious. And the fact that people find a lot of enjoyment in this liquid. A lot of people cement life memories around their experiences with beer. And even now with our beer, there are people that have had their first date in the tap room, or they met at a restaurant and they remember sharing a Country Boy beer together. Or there was a new dad and his best friend brought him over a 6-pack of Country Boy beer to celebrate his son being born. Or even on the other side of life, there are people that can say, the last beer I ever shared with my dad before he passed was a Country Boy shotgun wedding. And I'll always remember that as my dad's last beer that we had together. So we take that extremely seriously, that even though we're just making beer, there are people out there that are looking for cures for cancer and making rockets that fly to other planets and all types of crazy things. We just make beer, but at the same time, we make a liquid and have a brand and have created an experience that people have life-defining moments that are built around. And to us, that's extremely important. And so I would say would be a direct pull from our time in Japan of that. We wanted to, even though it's just beer, we to the nth degree need to be in the pursuit of making the perfect one. And it's that climbing the mountain till you get to the pinnacle, right? But when you think you're almost there, the clouds part and you see you still got a long way to go. Well, spoiler alert again, you never get to the top. That's the point. But the point's not getting to the top, the point's the climb, right?
Well, will you join me in having my first Country Boy moment?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Usually after we finish chatting, we go on to our cocktail of the week. But this week, we're doing something a little different. Since we're talking beer, I decided to scrap the cocktail of the week for this episode. Instead, we're going on a tour. When I visited Country Boy, DH walked me through the brewery, and I thought, why not take you with me as well? So consider this our first Lush Tour. Just a reminder, other people were with me on the tour, and a few asked questions, including me. So you'll hear a few voices on the recording as well as mine and DH's. So let's begin our Lush tour of Country Boy Brewery.
Less than a year later. We opened in Lexington February 10th, 2012. We opened up here February 17th of 2017. We missed 5 years to the day by 1 week. But that's just because the bathrooms weren't running, and we figured if you're having a beer establishment, you needed to have bathrooms. So we waited a week, which is why we weren't dead on the money. We've been, like I said, coming up in February on 2 years in this facility. This is the largest brew house in Kentucky. There are breweries that make more liquid than we do, but this is the largest facility. But also, just a little fun fact, this is the first new construction brewery in Kentucky since Prohibition. Every other brewery that exists in Kentucky right now, including our other brewery in Lexington, has been retrofitted into an older building, which we looked at doing that, but we kept coming back to, we wanted this place to be totally built 100% around how do we make the best beer as efficiently, as safely, and as economically as possible, in addition to having a state-of-the-art tap room that's out front. So the tap room in Lexington is about as big as this room here. It's very small. But you can see the tap room patio out here affords us the ability to do many, many events and things like that for the city, or for the community. This room right here is our private room, obviously, as you can see. It's available at no cost in the afternoons for any nonprofit or civic group. You just got to call us and tell us. And at night, we rent it out for parties and things like that. We've hosted everything at the brewery, from knitting groups, church groups, prayer groups, bicycle rides. You have to be careful with bike rides. It's two different types of people. Bicycle. We have no temperance groups. Motorcycle groups. All types of stuff. Plus, we've had concerts here that have been pretty well attended. So it's a pretty cool facility that we're really, really proud of. So we're glad to host you guys here today. The first year we were in business, we brewed 500 barrels of beer. This year we should hit 21,000.
21,000?
Yeah, so we had 0 employees when we started. We should be about 45 by the end of the year this year. We're about 36 right now. So once the kitchen staff comes on and we hire a few other people, that should push us to 45. We just hired last week our first lab technician. She has a lab in the back. I don't even know what she does in there. Hopefully she knows what she's doing. It's way over my head. She's doing all types of quality control. It looks like a doctor's office. She's growing up all types of microbes and yeast. Because now, reaching the size that we reach now, it's very important we keep our quality and our QC at top notch. We have 4 brands that are our core brands, which you see on the back wall back here, which are American Pale Ale, Halfway Home, Cliff Jumper is our India Pale Ale, Shotgun Wedding is our brown ale with vanilla beans. Our biggest seller by far is our Cougar Bait, the Blonde Ale. And a lot of that is just because we attribute that to the type of drinker that's in the southeast part of the U.S. That's used to drinking that type of liquid. But it's about still 75-80% of all production here is that one beer.
Has it turned full circle so that you're exporting to Japan now?
We've sent exports back 3 separate times to Japan, for special events. We don't send beer all the time there. But that's kind of been a dream come true to be able to see our stickers and see our signs and people that at bars that I frequent in Japan that have our beer and drink it now. It's kind of cool.
Do you sell out of the state?
We do. We are in Indianapolis, south of Indiana, a little bit into Ohio, all of Kentucky, all of West Virginia, most of Tennessee, and in Roanoke, Virginia. So 6 states total is our distribution.
On draft.
On draft and in these 4 packages mainly. Those 4 we have in cans. We have some other cans as well that we put in seasonals and some especially bottles. You'll see we have a big sour collection of wild fermented beers here. They're in bottles. That stuff probably stays pretty close to home.
No exports to the UK yet?
None yet.
Is that in the pipeline?
We've got a few friends over there. There's actually a Kentucky brewery in London or in Louisville that has some really deep connections with some breweries in London, and they've been shipping product over. So we've talked about sending some stuff that way. Basically, we send through the Kentucky Guild of Brewers. We would send a shipping container full of Kentucky beer to there, and then they would send us. We would return it full of some beer from London. So that's kind of the idea for now. Start small like that and see where we get to. But inherently, craft beer in general, especially smaller breweries like us, freshness is key. So once we start getting around, like when we send it to Japan, literally on the other side of the globe, the quality is that we have to kind of look at that because we want to make sure that we're still sending good product over there. But everything that we start with is our malted barley. Comes through these pipes, these stainless steel pipes here above us. It finally goes into this stainless tank right in front of me, the smaller one. From there, we have a secondary system that fires up. It takes it into the large mash tun on the far right. Basically in there, we're adding that ground grain with hot water, and we're going to pull all those great flavors, sugars, and colors out of that grain.
Where does your barley come from?
Most of our barley is from the Midwest or Southwest Canada. And that's because they have malting houses there. We do use some Kentucky product as much as we can, but heavily the malted barley and stuff is going to come from the Midwest. Once we're in there, we're going to sit for about an hour. We pulled all those good flavors, colors, sugars out. We go to the middle vessel, which is our boil kettle. We're going to boil for about 90 minutes. We're going to add our hops in there, potentially any other adjunct flavorings, depending on what kind of beer we're making. Asterisk on that, we only use real product. There's no fake extracts. If it's a fruit, it's a real fruit. It's a puree, it's a real puree. There's no chemicals or additives added. We're going to boil for about 90 minutes. Then we're going to go to the whirlpool, which is the last tank where it's going to spin it in a circle, and we're going to leave particulate behind and send it on down the line. So basically, when people talk about the brewing process, this part is where we're actually cooking the mash and everything like that. This is fermentation bay, fermentation rows. where the beer, up until this point, it's not beer yet, it's not alcoholic. We've got to add our yeast in line. That's yeast key into the fermentation process. Yeast is going to eat the sugars. As a process of that respiration, it's going to give off CO2 and alcohol, and that's what's going to turn the wort into beer. Now, if I'm giving a tour to some younger kids, I know I can always get a laugh when I say, basically what's going on in there, scientifically broken down, is yeast eats the sugar and has a little bowel movement and lets out some alcohol and has some gas come out, has some CO2 come out. And they all laugh and chuckle about it. But if they're old enough, then I can follow that up with, so literally, this is the best shit you've ever tasted. And usually I get booed off shortly after that. But that's the fermentation process. All our fermentation is controlled. The black pipes that run above us actually control the temperature of the tanks. They're double walled, so we can control how hot that liquid's getting. As the beer ferments, it does get hotter. That reaction is exothermic, so the beer is rising in temperature. We want to make sure it stays at a constant because we don't want some off flavors that arise from hot fermentation. Once we're done fermenting out, we're going to travel to the end. And we'll walk down that way. We're going to go this way to the right, though. Questions yet?
Why do you, this is just an assumption that you're not doing this. I see lots of cans, but not bottles. Do you bottle your beer or just
We bottle
cans?
only the sour beers, but everything that's a normal beer goes into a can, and that is because in the U.S. market right now, cans are cheaper to ship, cheaper to store. They stack. The stores like them because they fit in the sets better. Convenience stores like them because they fit in the singles better. They're smaller, therefore they don't take up a larger amount. They're impervious to light, which is a better UV rays are a quick spoiler or destructor of beer.
Right.
They also have actually better technology to keep oxygen out than a Crown does on top of the cap.
Where do you source, or how do you source the water?
So all our water, we're blessed here just because obviously we're piggybacking off the bourbon guys. We have great just groundwater here in Kentucky. It's very, very hard limestone water, which makes for great IPAs, lagers, darker ales, just nice and crisp. Now, when we get it, all we have to do to it is we basically have a reverse osmosis system. So we're taking out the chlorine, we're taking out the stuff that the water company's putting into it. Once we do that through an activated charcoal filter, it's good to go. Our water, we're so blessed here. Versus we have friends in some of the larger cities like Indianapolis and Cincinnati that have to really, really strip the water down to nothing, add minerals back to it to keep it constant. For us, we have the water here is single source, therefore we know we're getting the same thing every time. So we're really, really blessed in that aspect. Any other questions?
Yeah, can I ask you why the explosion in small breweries?
Great question. I wish I had a pinpoint answer for you. I can give you my opinion. I think in the U.S. market for the longest time, with the rise of mass market beer, Budweiser, Miller Coors, the ad campaigns that they did, that's what beer was supposed to taste like. It was supposed to be ice cold. That was the mindset that people got into, as well as we at some point in time, around the same time actually, we got away from mom and pop restaurants, from home style, hometown spots, a pub, to more chain-driven type restaurants, which is kind of the same thing in the restaurant world as what the beer world was. So I think what you've seen now is a pushback, a counterculture to that mass-marketed beer that was shoved down everyone's throats for so long, literally.
It was terrible. You come here and you drink that chemical beer.
Yes, right.
And they would wake up in the morning.
Feel
It's
terrible.
Horrible.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
And
you couldn't get decent beer. People forget.
Yes, and so I think there was probably with the proliferation of people traveling more as well, because I can remember being young and taking a trip through my French class at the high school, and it was one of those 15-day trips, and we saw 20 countries in Europe. You're in every spot for 6 hours, and one of the things that everyone talked about was the beer was warm over there. The beer was warm. And I was younger at the time, but much less was put on the flavor of the beer. It was just on the fact that the beer was warm. Now, just throw out a quick nugget so we can get back in the front. Now, right around the 40s and 50s in America, a lot of the big beer companies that were buying the small ones up, continuing in the 60s and 70s, came with this thing of ice cold beer, right? We've got the coldest beer in town. Our beer is ice cold, ice cold, ice cold. Throw away all the cask ales and things of that nature because that's garbage. We want to have tap beer ice cold. Well, scientifically, CO2, carbon dioxide, will stay in liquid when it's colder longer. which is the reason if you have a soda and it's ice cold and you give it a little shake and you pop it up, it'll spray and foam a little bit. Same with the beer. If that soda or beer is hot and you shake it up, you pop it, it just pssts everywhere. Because when a liquid is warmer, that CO2 wants to escape. So somebody at an ad agency that was way smarter than me back in the 50s, and 60s, and 70s said, if we can convince American people to drink light beer and drink it ice cold, when it hits their stomach, what's the one thing you always hear about people, their complaints about it? Beer makes me feel bloated. That's because the CO2 is coming out once it reaches your body and gets warmer. But if you can start with beer that's way colder, it takes longer for the CO2 to escape, which therefore by the time you feel full, you've already ingested another beer or two in you. It's all a marketing ploy, right? So I think if I could then come back in a circuitous way to answer your question, an education for the consumer is going on right now. They're understanding that there are other products out there outside of Budweiser, Miller Coors, because I feel like being in the beer industry, we've been the laughing stock of the world when it comes to beer for the better part of the last 50 years, because they knew you could come, when you came here, like just to your point, you knew the beer was going to be terrible. And then when you got back to your home country, wherever it may be, that was the one, yeah, we had a great time, but the two main things, it was crowded, the place was big, or the beer was terrible. That was usually the, once we're done fermenting, just get back to how our take on beer. These are our bright tanks in the back. Bright beer tanks just mean clean beer tanks. We can carbonate and pressurize inside that vessel. From here, we just go into the cooler or go into the can. This is our canning line back here to my right. Cans about 40 cans a minute. Talk about our friends at Budweiser. Their machine cans about 2,500 cans a minute. That's the kind of different. Their canning line wouldn't fit in this building. And then from there, it goes in the cooler, which we'll take a look in. And from the cooler, it goes out the door. So real quick, if it's a hot summer day and you can't find anybody working, they're all in here.
Yeah, I love it.
But on the other side, if it's a very, very cold day, they come in here to warm up. And it stays a constant 36 degrees. But to us, it's very, very important to keep beer cold. Cold is a very, very key part, probably the most key part to freshness. Beer is a very perishable product. Ours very perishable. So the minute it leaves the canning line, it stays cold until the minute it hits the cold truck to be shipped out. And I don't know if this is the biggest cooler in Scott County in Georgetown, but this is the most beer in one facility. So in case of the apocalypse, just get here as quick as you can. We've got enough beer to last us at least a few years. So,
I like it.
that's right.
Thanks so much to DH for taking us on the tour, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll have photos of the brewery on my post, so check them out on alushlifemanual.com. If you want more info about the state, head to www.kentuckytourism.com. We're staying in Kentucky next time, but we're heading to Louisville, or more accurately, Shively, where Stitzel-Weller Distillery sits and is now the home of Bullet Bourbon. Until next time, bottoms up. Thanks for listening to the Lush Life Podcast, the sister of A Lush Life Manual. For more information and links to everything you heard, plus a bit more, please visit alushlifemanual.com. Always remember the wise words of Oscar Wilde. All things in moderation, including moderation. And always drink responsibly. Okay, I said that last part. Theme music is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. Lush Life is produced by Evo Terra, and I'm your hostess, Susan Schwartz. I'll see you at the bar.